Hi, my name is Greg Canty, and I'd like to welcome you to the Win Happy podcast. I love chatting to people from all walks of life about their lives and their careers, about the choices they make along the way to pursue their happiness, and what winning actually means to them. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I do. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat with the comedy actor John Culshaw, who is well known to all of us from his many roles and TV appearances. From an early age, John discovered he had the ability to make people laugh with his impersonations of big characters in his life, such as his grandmother's housekeeper, Mrs. Jump. From hospital radio to Spitting Image, from Dead Ringers to the Royal Variety Show, John has made us laugh for decades. There is also the serious side, with the narration of David Bowie in The Final Take for the BBC World Service, and playing the role of Boris Johnson in the Channel 4 documentary Partygate. But most of all, John is a super nice, wise man who's a great listener and has a lovely outlook on life. Let's hear from John. Okay, testing. I hope this equipment is working. Is that working? Oh, Jesus Christ almighty, look who it is.
Sort of like, I'm not butting into a broadcast here. Are you live or something,
Is it yourself?
Well, I was sort of, a little under the radar tonight, because over here, near Mizzen Head, it sort of reminded me, of when I was writing Muller Kintyre, that something so very peaceful could be so stirring and move you very deeply, even though it's very, harmonious and quiet and that juxtaposition of the piece with something that really gets in your veins, and you get that in this area too, and also you can just go past a little, little junk shop or whatever, so, an emporium, just buy a mandolin, any kind of instrument that you weren't expecting to get and just put something together, that's inspired by, by these lands,
Jesus, Paul, I'd love to talk to you, but I'm recording a podcast in a few minutes. I've got a very important guest coming, so...
Everyone's a broadcaster now, aren't they,
Don't take the piss, don't mock, I'm trying my best here,
No, I'm sure it's great,
Yeah, it is, thanks a million, Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah, is your nose out of joint a bit with these Oasis boys and their big comeback album and stuff?
Hey, it's funny enough, it was a conversation that I had, with each of them, saying, forget all this feuding business, and while you can, get back together and perform again, because I think we'd all love to see it, and if you don't, you might regret it, so that was a chat that we had, and I'm glad it's happening.
Yeah. Okay, fair. Well, if you're around later, maybe I'll chat to you again, Paul, because...
it's Greg, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Greg,
nice
yeah.
All right, it's good to see you, man.
Yeah, nice to meet you, man. Nice to meet you. Oh, Jesus, look who else is after walking in.
Look, I think this part of the world, I think it's very beautiful. I think the great golf courses that you could have here. I've seen the fastnet thing over there. What is that, a lighthouse?
It's a lighthouse. It's a lighthouse, Donald.
It's a lighthouse. I looked at it and I thought that could be a very wonderful Playboy mansion with a distinctive shape, with a little beacon flashing every 5 seconds, which I think there's a lot we could do with this place, a lot of golf courses, a lot of Playboy mansions. And we're going to be looking into this and, very inspirificating, these lands.
Yeah, it's a very real place, Donald, but you don't like real, do you?
Oh, Real is, that's in Wales, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Real Sun Centre. Because they don't get a lot of sunshine over there, but in the Real Sun Centre, they have a solarium, and it's it sort of gives you the illusion of a vacation, not as good as you would get in a Trump hotel, but yeah, in that sense, I think real is good. If that's the real we were talking about.
Yeah, but Donald, what the hell are you doing here? It's 2 weeks from the election. You should be in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Minnesota. What are you doing?
I should. Sometimes you just got to take your eye off of the ball and away from events, just to find your clarity, and just to find your peace, just to get some perspective, so you don't say dumbass things the whole time. And so I thought I would come here, just let it settle. And as I described, sometimes you just got to take your eye away and let your heart lead you. This is the place where I actually talk sensible.
Oh.
I'm not as outlandish as I normally am, you know. I come here and the truth comes. This is where I give my sensible answers, considered, not outrageous. This is where I talk the best.
Yeah. Do you think we eat our cats and dogs here, Donald?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think the people take great care of them. And they're given very nice treats like Dreamies and pedigree chum. I think that's what the pets get over here. Real kindness going on, real kindness. I think that's what happens.
Well, Donald, I'd love to talk to you, but my friend is coming here now with John.
Okay.
But there's a lad over there in the corner. He's from a band called The Beatles. You might like to go and have a chat with him.
Oh, yes, Cart McPaulney. He seems a swell guy.
Swell.
Whether he would talk to me, I don't know. We could just see what sort of conversation we get to. Maybe it would be okay.
Yeah. Before I let you go, Donald, did you win the last election?
I believe I did. I said that the election was stolen.
Which one?
The one where where Sleepy Joe started. But I think what the truth was, that I was just very, very unhappy. I was just very unhappy. I'm not somebody who can just very humbly say, well, I'm sorry I didn't make it. That's not the Donald way. I have to have noise and bluster. And I think that's kind of what I did. So I don't think it was stolen. I think I lost, not by much, but I don't intend to do that this time.
Well, Donald, I believe you don't drink, but you might have a pint of the black stuff tonight with Paul in the corner.
I think so. He will have the Guinness. I'm going to have some Marmite with some shaving cream on top because it looks right. And that way I can have the feeling of partaking in a drink, but by keeping away from alcohol at the same time.
Yeah, okay, Don. Listen, I have to let you go. My friend is here now.
Greg, I wish you a very happy podcast. And you're spreading the good word, and I thank you for your good energy, great energy. And thank you very much. I wish you a very good podcast. I really do.
Yeah. Thank you, Donald. Thank you,
That's
Donald.
okay, Greg. That's okay. Swell guy. Very. I know. I just came in, he was going to talk to somebody, but, we just got into a bit of a chat, And, I think we were the prologue to what's coming, Well, I'm sure it's going to be very good.
Yeah, Donald, Paul, thank you so much. I need to get on with things now.
Thanks, man. All right, great. See you later. Good luck. Come and work for me. You got brains. Come and work for me. I'm going to hire you.
John, my buddy, how you doing?
Very well. It's in a packed pub tonight.
Yeah, it is full. Lots of your old buddies. Who'd have thought it on a Wednesday night in Crookhaven?
I think people come here to be just for the peacefulness and just for the, just for that unexpected sense of that place that just gives your brain a shampoo, makes you feel peaceful right from the inside.
So, if I sat next to you on a plane, and they've delivered us our peanuts and our orange juice, which they don't do anymore, by the way, but let's pretend.
Yes.
And we're having a little chit-chat, and I turn around and I ask you, well, what do you do?
I would probably say a comedy actor. I'd probably say I do a few voices. I do a few characters, a few impersonations. Do a show called Dead Ringers, which has run on Radio 4 since the year 2000. It's a topical comedy show.
Yeah,
so I'd probably say something like that.
So you're around more than a day or two?
If needs be, yes, if needs be.
Before we get into it, I must say something to you. Yeah, so we sat down to do our little recording, and of course I forgot one of my gizmos. And oh, for God's sake. So I must trottle up the road and trottle back, a bit inconvenient, 20 minutes out of your schedule, our time. And as usual, you come back with the positive.
Aha, yes.
Yeah, you said that's a little bit of serendipity. Something will happen because of that. And I think we make a choice in these situations when something presents itself. Something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Either a positive or a negative. Are you always on the positive?
Yes, I think you have to be. We've all seen people who sort of just moan all the time and scowl all the time and wonder why things don't really flow as best as they could for them. I think they're playing a part to create events to be that way. Whereas if you see things as a nifty little unexpected opportunity, could mean this, it could mean that, naturally you're going to feel better about it. You'll just have a better mood and optimism.
Yeah.
And you might just attract something along the way.
Because you make a choice. What version of yourself do you bring to the day, to different situations?
Yes.
And you seem to do that. And we're obviously recording this in West Cork, and I was sharing a little version of my story with you, which was when we spend a lot of time here, we invariably end up not spending as much time with some of our pals back in Cork City.
Yeah.
And I was asking you the question, does that mean in order to acquire a new experience, you have to subtract, you have to leave things behind? And of course, as usual, you gave me your pearls of wisdom. Go on, go for it.
Well, I always say that, as you described there, sometimes people describe, I'm leaving such a place. I'm moving away from London to go here. I shall miss it. And it's spoken about with a sense of loss. But it's not a loss, really, is it? The time that you had and spent it in London or wherever it may be, that familiarity will always be with you.
Yeah.
The new place that you're going to, you're adding something to your collection. I think life is a patchwork of all of our experiences. So I choose to not think of it in a sense of loss, but you've just added it to your collection. Life is very fluid. I'm still in London a huge amount of time, and I've got so much familiarity that it just clicks right back into place, even if I've not been there for 2 or 3 weeks. Just an instant back there, or wherever it may have been. And I do that with a lot of places now. I spent time in Blackpool and in Hull on radio, and where else? Sheffield. Many, many places. I never really felt like I left any of them, but they were part of a patchwork, part of the tapestry of life that makes up your mindset at any given time.
And again, I ask you that question, who are you? And it's obviously the comedy actor, the impersonator, the TV star, the singer, I believe, at one point in time, the amateur astronomer.
Yes.
But there's actually a very wise man in there with a fantastic outlook. I think you could be, I don't know, a philosopher or a counsellor or something.
A counsellor? Do you know, well, that's very kind of you to say, Greg. I do often think that if I was occupying a different universe, or if fate had gone on differently, I might have been a counsellor. Quite often friends will have a little chat if they've gone through a difficult situation or something. And I do find that perhaps I do have a certain ability to, first of all, just listen with patience and a bit of fascination, but just to see things from the other angle that maybe might be in that person's blind spot, and just to give a little positive outlook that can just perhaps unhook the trapped way that they feel, or unhook a sense of being hopeless, or how on earth could this be? You just got to unhook that and just give people another, look this way, look across there. So yes, I do think I could have been a counsellor I think in an informal way in many instances. Perhaps I am.
Maybe they're the best ones, the informal ones.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't stop the clock and say, well, that'll be £8.50, that kind of thing.
Where did you acquire that skill or that gift?
I think it's just sort of mounted up over years, rather like a stalactite forming. Little bits of knowledge, little bits of experience, little bits of perception just mount up onto it. And I always choose to think that if your problem feels the size of a double-decker bus, then I think somewhere within you, your ability to deal with it is the size of a mountain. And I think that's the way to look at it. And I suppose I just got into the habit of having that chirpy outlook on life. Pessimism is no good. Worry is no good. It's like betting against yourself. So yes, some might call it delusion, but I find it quite useful.
The house you grew up in, where did you grow up?
In Ormskirk in Lancashire.
Yeah, and mum and dad, what do they do?
My dad, he was in the Royal Engineers in World War II, and he was part of the bomb squad. He would defuse unexploded bombs, and he did that most mornings for a period of 2 or 3 years. So he must have felt his life was on the line at any given moment. And he did witness some things. He was part of the D-Day landings, where the initial landings took place, and then the next day he'd come in as part of the Royal Engineers, and they'd start putting up the infrastructure, building bridges and things like that.
He obviously stepped over more than a body or two.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. He never spoke about it, apart from to his grandson, my nephew, who was doing a project for school, and he just asked to interview my dad, his granddad. And yes, that was the only time. It was recorded on a CD, which I've got in the sideboard drawer in Lancashire. And he did speak about it. He did speak about times when the two teams from each respective UXB bomb squad, the commander would say, right, okay, you go across to this site, and right, this other place is for you today, if you could go and deal with that one. And that evening, there were 8 chairs around the mess table, canteen. And 4 of them were unoccupied. And my dad asked the chief, are they okay? Are they still at the site? No, they're gone. They're gone. And yeah, their bomb wasn't one they were able to defuse. And I think the explosion was so bad that none of them could really be identified, that they were vaporized. This is the true horror of war. And so, yes, I remember they lived with that. But I think it did give my dad a very, very strong, pragmatic, here by the grace of God sort of sense. So yes, he did. He did witness all of those things.
You mentioned diffusing. There was a good friend of ours. His name is David Sands. We met him through the Hugh O'Flaherty work that we were doing in Rome. His father was a stretcher bearer in World War II. So he was obviously the one carrying blown up bodies and all of that. His mother was one of the safe houses that the Monsignor used in Rome. So that's where the escapees would go to for shelter and protection. She ran huge risks with her own family.
Yes.
So what she witnessed during World War II affected her greatly, to the extent that I think she suffered from her own mental health. Whereas David's father, everything was a joke. He'd tell these preposterous war stories about the man who ended up with 3 arms. Obviously, one got blown off by someone else, but everything was a joke.
Yes.
Is humour used as a device?
Yes, I think
to deal with the stress in those situations? And I wonder, in your case, with your dad, and maybe some of the humour in the family, was that a device that was used in your household?
I think so. I really do believe that with humour, and unless you can see the funny side, even in the toughest of situations, if you can find some sort of way to laugh, then you're marching forward, you're putting one boot in front of the other. And I do think it's a way that we get through. I think British comedy is as strong as it is because it's seeing the comedy in hardship, or it's seeing people win through despite the odds using comedy. Yes, I did, love the sort of atmosphere that could be created in home with, a few little impersonations of local characters or teachers or my parents' friends. It did make people smile.
Yeah.
And the moment anybody did smile or laugh, or you're in a better place.
So that was a little trick you learned, that I can make people laugh, or I can make them smile. And was that the motivation for the voices, or did it come the other way around?
I think that the voices were it was just a novelty, really. I never thought of it in any other term than that. It just seemed to make people laugh, and that was nice.
Yeah.
Made for a nice atmosphere. People just seemed to laugh, so that would egg me on. I'd do it all the more. Then on a Saturday night, I'd watch Mike Yarwood on BBC One in those classic days of television. And there was someone doing on the TV what I did around the dinner table.
Yeah.
So I always watched Mike Yarwood. But yes, I think the moment you use humour in the right... There are times when you do have to be serious, but if comedy is not too far away, then you've got a chance. You've got a chance, I think.
Your housekeeper, what might she have said to you?
Oh, Mrs. Jump, yes. She was my grandmother's cleaning lady. And a lovely Lancashire character, She spoke like that, the words curling up at the end. A little bit of Fred Dibner, that kind of thing, There was her voice, not only she would smile, but her voice would smile too. Yeah. You could hear her smile. I'm there, you see, yes. So yes, Mrs. Jump, Kitty Jump. She was an example of one of those wonderful local characters that could have been written by Alan Bennett or Les Dawson. Kitty Jump, my grandmother's cleaner, was exactly one of those.
But she was a character in your life, just another everyday person.
Yeah, she was. There was lots of them.
Colour.
Yes, exactly. Just character, you know. There was another one called Winnie McGrath, who was sort of, a little bit more, get out where you're getting in the way of the jumble sale, lad. Get from under feet. She was more grumpy, but in a rather lovely way. I remember Mrs. Fretwell, who lived at the top of the road.
She sounds very stern.
Mrs. Fretwell, she was quite benevolent. Her voice had a creak in it like that. She spoke rather like a barn door opening.
I'd say you entertained the family at night with all of these characters.
Yes, exactly. Mrs. Fretwell, I never expected we'd mention her tonight. She rather spoke like an Oliver Postgate sort of bagpuss commentary. Yes, like that. Yes.
Wouldn't Mum and Dad tell you, don't be knocking the neighbours, it's rude?
My mum would say, oh, Jonathan, oh dear me, oh, you cheeky thing. Yeah. Oh, but because I was being quite benevolent with it, because I was, quite, sweet about it, really.
Yeah. And that's the difference. You weren't mocking and you weren't being harsh.
No.
As our pal Donald, who's sitting in the corner, but Paul would have done quite easily and deliberately to people.
Yes, exactly.
In terms of the young lad, John, sitting in the classroom in school and the teacher, for whatever reason, has totally and utterly lost your attention. But where do you wander off to in your head?
I think I would look out the window across the school playground, maybe to the sports field. I often would... I remember once, I don't know why I did this, but I had to go to try and get into the football team.
Well done.
No good at football. I had a plastic football from Woolworths, and I used to enjoy kicking it against a wall, just to see what angles it would bounce back at. And I remember auditioning for the football team. Do you audition? Maybe it's a football
trials.
The trials, that's right. That's right.
You didn't do this very often, from the sounds of it.
I did it once. And
auditions is what you do if you're going for a part in a movie.
Yes, exactly.
Or a part in a play.
It certainly wasn't that with the football. And the games teacher said, look, I think you better probably, step aside from this. You're looking up at the clouds and looking at the sun. You're looking at the star formations rather than on the game. So maybe this one's not for you.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite accurate, and I was very cold. So that was one of those places where I was completely misplaced, but I was fascinated to be there nonetheless.
But funny as well, saying this isn't for you. You can't be part of that gang. Were you in a different gang?
I think I was just with my own group of friends. I think we were just the sort of quieter ones. We weren't very boisterous kids. We weren't like, in a Grange Hill scene where they're all running through the corridor and sort of like, waving their arms about and throwing each other's bags at each other and so on. Me and my friends would just walk along quite steady.
You were a good lad.
Yeah, I think so. We were daft, but we were on that particular energy setting rather than the boisterous, boorish ones.
And the whole notion of finding a career and putting bread on the table throughout your lifetime. Did you have a direction in mind?
Not really. Not really. And I'm quite glad about that, really. Because up until about 14 or so, I wasn't really thinking in those terms. I think I was just enjoying being the age that I was. And I would read books about dinosaurs. I would make clipped-together model dinosaurs. I'd read the Observer's Book of Astronomy. I would play with little pocketeers, those games with ball bearings in them, which were the apps of their time. I would go to a farm where my dad worked, a mushroom farm, and climb on bales of straw or wooden mushroom boxes that were piled on top of each other, maybe 50 foot high. I'd climb them like Spider-Man, no thought of health and safety. And I was just out there. Butterflies I was fascinated by. I'd go and walk along country tracks and tried to spot different species of butterflies and tick them off in the spotter's guide. The thought of a career just really wasn't there at this time.
Were mum and dad not nudging you about getting serious and you have to knuckle down and do some sort of a course, become an accountant, John?
At times they would say, now what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You've got to start to... And I think late 14, or I'd just turned 15. I think I was in third year of high school, and there was one lesson called Careers. And the careers teacher was called Mr. Breen, Ken Breen, good teacher. And he also did woodwork. But he took these careers classes, and he said a very wise thing. Just before you take your options, he said, what you're good at and what you enjoy, this is the thing to go for.
That sounds like a recipe for win happy.
Yes, it does.
And at that stage, so your career guy, Ken Breen,
Yeah.
he was armed with that bit of rationale
Yes.
to advise that cohort of kids coming through.
And I love the way he said it. He spoke in the way, it was rather like a football manager giving a pep talk at half-time.
Yeah.
What you're good at, what you enjoy, this is what you should follow. He sort of spoke it a bit like you'd imagine Bobby Robson to a football team. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And that was a clue. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do. I knew I'd be rubbish if I worked in an office or a bank or that kind of thing. And I thought, oh, well, I'm quite fascinated by radio. I like it in the English lessons if I have to read out loud. I've done a few local pantomimes. Right, so it's something to do with performance then. That's the broad line. And I think that was the moment when I started to think, right, what the heck am I going to do then?
And was there a formal way then of pursuing that?
Yes, and you just chose the subjects that you wanted. So I went for art, English, when drama was available in sixth form college. I went for that then. You had to do maths and chemistry and those things. That was the formal things. That was compulsory, but that was all right. Chemistry was a way of learning what the atmosphere on other planets was composed of. So that was interesting. But yeah, late 14, early 15. That's the moment of thinking, right, okay, what are we going to do then? And I knew it was something to do with performance, something to do with radio, somewhere over that way. And I became quite tenacious in trying to follow a line towards that.
When was the first time someone actually paid you money for doing some of that stuff? The outputs of those interests?
I had a few Saturday jobs before then. I worked in an electrical shop called Pope Brothers in Southport because I had a ZX Spectrum, so I knew a little bit about computers. I could make the screen do funny, colourful things. I vaguely knew about the Commodore 64.
Paul is after starting a sing-song in the corner.
Radio.
Well, maybe we've got some people who could help out with it, because, they might do one of my songs, so some royalties, that'll be okay.
But yes, all the memories start coming back. The first time I sent off lots of demo tapes to radio stations.
What was on the demo tapes?
Me pretending to do a radio show.
Oh, have you got a good radio voice? Go on.
At the time, I didn't.
Yeah.
I can impersonate myself at that age. I'd be about 15 or 16. And I would sort of sound somewhere like this, and I'd try to talk like the DJs on Radio City. And that's Van Halen there, and Jump. And this is a new song, and it's called Digging Your Scene, and it's by the Blow Monkeys. And I just tried to knit a show together like that, and just send it off to radio stations. Never got anywhere, but just with practice and actually volunteering at hospital radio and getting a bit more familiar with it.
Yeah, so hospital radio was a good way in.
Yes, hospital radio was so important. The first time speaking behind a microphone, talking in between records, and just getting familiar with how you press the buttons, press the fader up, make the record start and talk, and stop talking when the singing begins. That was how it all... I could feel the symbiosis of everything knitting together in Radio Ormskirk General in the hospital radio studio.
It must be an unusual gig when, for the most part, your audience is a bunch of people who don't want to be there.
Yeah.
They're sick, or they're visiting sick people, or they're working there, of course. Must be very tuned into the needs of that audience. And maybe humour might help with that cohort of people as well.
Yes, I think so. With hospital radio, what helps is you have to do the ward rounds beforehand. So you go along the wards and you meet the patients and you have a little chat. And you ask them what they would like to hear, or what they'd like you to play for them.
Any requests?
Yes, exactly. So you get a sense of your audience. And then you get back to the studio armed with that. And because the studios were always quite, peaceful, sort of, intimate places, quite chilled places, you get into that broadcasting mode of whereby you're just talking to one person. And, the microphone, and you're just in somebody's headphones. So, hi there, it's not sort of, hello to all you people out there in hospital land. It's just very conversational. And, it was a very rewarding thing to do. I was 18 when I was doing hospital radio.
And did the impersonations come into that gig?
Yes, they did. At the time I would do Bob Geldof occasionally. One of those great, instantly recognisable characters. I wish you well, get out of hospital soon, take great care.
Or maybe Frank Bruno would be in there, He'd be in there, This is level 42 here. And they're called level 42 because the biggest car park in the world has got 42 levels. So that's what they got their name from,
Anything to just make, just for novelty, really. Just for novelty.
Did someone rescue you from hospital and with another wonderful gig?
I'd do the shows, but afterwards I'd stay behind and use a proper studio to make some fresh demo tapes with. And so I would
You were leapfrogging from one opportunity to the next.
I just did a bit of practice and made some tapes. And eventually I sent one to the local station in Preston, Red Rose Radio, to the programme controller, Mike Henfield. And I just had a lucky break, and I think they needed some people to do weekend cover or whatever it was, and I got a shot at that on Red Rose Radio, doing the overnight show in an empty church. I was the only one in the building. It was a converted church turned into a radio station, and I was just there 4 hours overnight, just talking to whoever was awake in Lancashire. Truckers, insomniacs, and whoever else it might be, just playing these tunes, they were always rather obscure tunes. Overnight, they wouldn't let you play the hit records because they cost more to pay for in royalties and PRS and whatnot. So you just had the weird stuff to play, and you just had to make the best of it. The themed Postman Pat or something like that, because it was for free, and the listeners must be thinking, why on earth is this on?
And with those gigs, you're there by yourself. Imagining that character at home by themselves in the midnight hour or in the early hours of the morning.
Yeah.
And you're talking into a void. I presume there's no call-ins. There's no email. How would you even cope with that? Operating in the void. Who's giving you feedback? Who's responding to you?
Yes, I suppose you just have to try to key into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
You just have to key into the way that, you're feeling playing the music, playing the records. If you can create a nice relaxed feeling, then maybe you're translating that to the listeners, Maybe you're doing that. And that's all you... There was one evening when I thought, right, playing Hotel California here, 7 minutes long, I can go and have a little ciggy break. Because I was, 19 years old, didn't know better at the time. I was smoking at the time. So I went into the newsroom and just had a little ciggy break. Plenty of time with Hotel California. And I went back. And then I played what other record of 1987 it might have been. Maybe True Blue by Madonna or some record of that period. And there was a red light by the side of the studio clock, which started to flash. And I thought, that's unusual. What's that? Is it the phone? No, it's not the phone. It's the fire alarm. Oh no. Oh no. So I dashed back into the newsroom, and sure enough, this cigarette that I hadn't put out properly just dropped into a bin in a newsroom with lots of, paper and old news reports thrown in the bin. It was a light, and it had set the wooden desk on fire below it. And I thought, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, no, no. So I remember the public information films that I'd seen about chip pan fires. And I just found a towel, soaked it with water, put it over the bin. That seemed to stop the flames. So I ran back into the studio. I need another long record. The 12-inch of Blue Monday by New Order. That's another 7.5 minutes. Put that on. Dashed back into the newsroom. Try to open all the windows to let the smoke out. And the fire was out by this time. And sure enough, I managed to get the smoke out of there. Blue Monday by New Order finished. I just needed one more record. Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. That's another best part of 7 minutes.
No, you're playing the hits now. This was costly music.
Well, it was all I could do. I just had to risk it.
Yeah.
And yes, I managed to douse the flames, get rid of all of the smoke, bring peace back to the newsroom. By the time Freddie Mercury said, "Nothing really matters, anyone can see," and I just had this feeling of, peace after a storm. And nobody ever knew about me setting the Red Rose Radio newsroom on fire until now.
No one ever knew.
I managed to get away with it. It was overnight, you see. Yeah. And it was, best part of 40 years ago now, so that's okay.
So the move away from being a DJ who loves setting studios on fire, how did that happen? How did the alternative career come about?
There was a very specific moment, and it was at Viking Radio. I was 21 by this time.
You were getting old.
Yes, exactly. As soon as your age starts with a 2, oh dear me, you're feeling the years are mounting up on the clock. And I had the great chance to interview Lenny Henry, who was doing a show at the Whole New Theatre, a play at the time. And he was so wonderful. He was on the phone. It was a phone interview. But we started just mucking about with voices and things like that. It was great fun. And Lenny Henry was just so brilliant and so generous. And he said, "Do you know what? You should send a tape to Spitting Image. Send a tape to Spitting Image. They're always looking for people." And a little light bulb appeared above my head. I thought, right, well, I must do that. And the next day, I think as a result of, the energy of chatting with Lenny Henry, I was doing a few more voices just in the show. And 4 o'clock came. I came off the air at that time, and I walked into the reception area. It was hammering down with rain outside the studio. So for a little bit longer than usual, I stayed and chatted with Anne-Marie, who was the station receptionist, who was the Kylie Minogue of Hull. She was very lovely, very, very bonny soul indeed. We all thought the world of Anne-Marie. And I just had a slightly longer chat with her whilst the rain died down. And she said, "I was listening to your show today." Had this beautiful Hull accent. "Never mind talking in between Madonna records. Them voices what you do, make that your job. Make that the thing you do. Never mind talking in between records." And I thought, right, okay, well, let's turn off this motorway. Let's aim for another part of the horizon. And let's try to do the impressions thing. Like Rory Bremner does, like Bobby Davro does, like Mike Yarwood does, like Jessica Martin, whoever. And that was another moment. That was the next little motivation in the time.
Serendipitous moment again.
Yeah,
Fiddling out of the heavens.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Had it not been chucking it down, I probably would have, just gone into the car and gone home and walked the dog.
Yeah. You need to keep your head up and be alert for opportunities, don't you?
Yes. You never know where or how they will come.
And in your game, you don't survive unless you have that mindset, I presume.
Yes, I think so. I think you've just got to have that natural sort of curiosity. You've got to have that sort of curiosity and zest for life and a sense of possibility. Always got to have a sense of possibility and a joy that such things can happen.
Were you a prankster at any point as part of these radio gigs?
Yes, I was, I think. I was. I was very inspired by, first of all, Paul Fairbairn on Red Rose Radio, who did a telephone feature called The Ring Thing, where you'd phone somebody up, pretend to be someone else, and do a little bit of a prank call. But the key thing, by the end of it, so long as the listener gave their permission for it to be broadcast, and as long as everybody was laughing at the end of it, and the person you'd called could see the joke.
It was with generous spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. Then it's okay. And I did a few of those with Paul Fairbairn. And then I did a few some years later with Steve Penk on Capital Radio. Steve did a few of his own, these comedy phone calls. Steve's were quite outrageous, but he had people howling with laughter at the end of it. And if ever he needed a character voice, then I'd do a few with Steve. One of them was probably the most notorious one. Was I called Steve one night and said, "I've got this new character." He said, "Okay, who is it? Who is it?" "Well, it's William Hague, the leader of the Conservative Party, who has this wonderful Huddersfield drawl. And, what I think there could be some great comedy value in this voice." And Steve would always see the most direct line from one place to another. And he said, "Right, well, then we've got to call Downing Street." I said, "What? Got to call Downing Street? We'll try Downing Street." Okay, that was always Steve's way. He'd always just...
Yeah, no messing.
Yeah, straight there, straight to the bullseye sort of thing. So we started thinking, well, what can we say to Downing Street if we do call them as William Hague? There he was with his Capital Radio bold spirit. And we thought, well, maybe the joke can be, yes, hello, Tony. It's just thought I'd phone up for a chat, see how you are, that sort of thing. Tony Blair was Prime Minister at the time, and we thought that the people on reception would probably say, oh, go away, do stop wasting our time. And then we can have some comedy value by saying, but I am the leader of the opposition. This is an outrage. Am I not important enough to be put through? How dare you? We thought that would be the joke. But the fluke was that it just happened to be Wednesday. Of course, that's Prime Minister's Questions. And it was quite usual that the leader of the opposition might just pop a telephone call into the Prime Minister ahead of Prime Minister's Questions. But this was never our deliberate plan. So, when Steve Penk got the number of the Cabinet Office from Directory Inquiries in February of 1998, this is when we did, and he just dialed the number and away we went. And hello, Downing Street. Oh, yes, hello, it's William Hague. I wondered if I could speak to Tony. Oh, yes, just a moment. What? Huh? This isn't meant to happen. What? And sure enough, the receptionist came back a few moments later and said, so who did you say was calling? Oh, yes, it's William Hague. Oh, yes, you sound normal again. Yes, you sounded an imposter before. Oh, no, I can assure you. Oh, dear. I was fretting like Stan Laurel at this time. And eventually this voice did come back. Yep, hello. And, oh, my goodness. Unmistakable. That was Tony Blair. Yes, hello, Tony. Hello, Tony. And he said, yeah. And this is where he knew something was up, because, we'd have said, hello, Tony, in the spirit of, Blair in every given interview at the time saying, just call me Tony, let's keep things informal, we work better if it's informal. But Hague, with his Yorkshire sort of sarcasm, would take great delight in just saying, yes, Prime Minister. So Blair knew something was up, but, we just had a little bit of a knockabout chat, and it was good for, apparently it brightened up his morning.
And he took it well, and you got the permission and all of that.
Well, we actually didn't get permission for this one, but because somebody, those people who monitor the Prime Minister's calls, pulled the plug, thinking this was quite unseemly for the Prime Minister. But apparently he was quite enjoying it. But somebody pulled the plug, and Steve Penk thought, well, we're never going to get permission if we ask for it, so we shall rather than ask permission, we shall apologise after the event, if need be. So he just broadcast it anyway. And then at Prime Minister's Questions that day, Tony Blair walked up to the dispatch box and said, well, this morning I took an interesting and detailed call from someone who had managed to convince the Downing Street switchboard that he was the leader of the opposition. That kind of stuff. And then William Hague came right back and said, I wondered, has the Prime Minister had a call from somebody claiming to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer and wanting a friendly chat? And then the news just went wild with it then, and it was on News at 10 that evening.
That's a door opener.
It's like with a bulldozer.
Yeah.
All benevolent, all very good-natured. But yes, that then became, a hook to hang your hat on, as it were.
Amazing. A very similar but silly story about our President Higgins.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah. So I was running for election for the Dublin Chamber of Commerce Council.
Yes.
Very prestigious. Mm-hmm. A thing that none of the members give a toss about.
Right.
Well, you have to lobby them and all that kind of thing, and lay out your manifesto why you would be a great council member representing those members.
Yeah.
It was a big deal because as a Corkonian running for a gig in Dublin, and we weren't, with any of the big firms or anything like that. It was Little Fusion Communications, Greg, the Cork boy. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I decided we needed to inject a little bit of humour into it. So I got my graphic designer to superimpose me with a bunch of different people who were all congratulating me on my campaign, and I was putting these out on social media. We were having that chat earlier about Twitter and LinkedIn and all that kind of thing. So it was Bono, and it was the Pope, I think it was Mary Robinson, and it was Michael D. And I'm sitting next to him, I think with a pint in my hand, and he's got a cup of tea. He's a very clever graphic designer and stuff. So that's fine. All of my council, all of my Dublin Chamber members were very, very impressed. I got a lot of laughs, and I ended up being voted in.
Oh, congratulations.
But out of the blue, I received a phone call from some communications guy who was German, who was working for President Higgins.
Wow.
And it was very stern, and you must take down that post immediately because the president doesn't endorse anyone's election campaigns. Like I said, hold on now. Then hands. It was a joke. And President Higgins knows a good joke when he sees it.
Yeah.
And I think he would be very disappointed in your phone call. And by all means, if you want me to take it down, I will. But I'm going to write a blog post about it, about the lack of sense of humour by the president.
Absolutely.
So it's up to you. It's up to you. He wasn't having it. I'm instructing you to take it down now. Who the hell do you think you are? And I did, out of respect for President Higgins at the time.
Yeah.
But I was amazed I got his attention. So the closing of the door of that radio career, where you've got a steady paycheck and I'm going to fly solo. I'm going to be tossed around in the breeze and see where the next opportunity comes from. What was that moment?
I think it was that chat in the Viking radio reception area with Anne-Marie.
With Anne-Marie.
I knew then that it was I was going to set about a different course. And I followed Lenny Henry's advice and I made some demo tapes to send to Spitting Image. And there was a moment when Steve Coogan moved on from the programme in 1993, and that created a vacancy where I got a chance to join Spitting Image, which was a chance to, leave radio behind a little bit. I still did a few bits here and there, but here, was a chance to work in London for a TV programme. It was my first job on television. And
it's a different ballgame.
Yeah.
You're not behind a microphone where nobody can see you.
No, you're behind a microphone giving voice for these puppets.
Yeah.
In a satirical TV programme that you've watched since you were 14 or 15 and that you've loved, and now you're part of that gang. And you've got to hold your own, you've got to maintain your station alongside the other voice artists, making these classic puppets come to life. Travelling to London twice a week to do that, and that was very sort of exhilarating, to walk through the capital city, to go to a job that you're going to be doing on television, and you can watch it that weekend. You'll see the fruits of your work brought to life on screen.
Was there a skip in your step?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You feel you're on a real purpose there.
Was that oh shit, or was it duck to water?
It was here we go.
Rock and roll.
It was here we go. Let's get this on.
Yeah.
Because you've got to campaign a bit to sort of get your chance with these things. You've got to be a bit determined and you've got to keep at it. And if at first you don't succeed. I'd sent about 2 or 3 tapes before the stars aligned and a vacancy came up. But you can't be a quitter. You've got to keep going. A certain instinct just keeps you going. If you feel that it's the right track, you've got to keep aiming for that.
Were there a lot of no's?
Yes, you get your share. But of course there will be. It's entirely normal.
Yeah.
I think there always is.
But sometimes no's are good because, for good reason, they avoid you doing things that may not be suited to you, or crappy situations that you're only too glad to avoid after.
Yes, exactly. Or it might be a no whereby it's been a no for these reasons.
Yeah.
So you get to see what you've got to put right.
Yeah, give me the feedback, please.
Yeah. So a no, it is an answer of some specific information, and it's going to guide you either way. It's going to lead to a stronger yes down the line.
Who were your mentors? Who did you learn most along the way?
Oh, my goodness me. I do remember there was one tutor called Eric Seal, and he was the vice principal at college. And the principal was a fellow called Mr. Haynes, and he was a good mentor as well, but he'd tell you, he was of the sort of the side of things, come on, now you've got to buck up. You've got to take things seriously here, And Eric Seal's way was to say, well, if you want to follow that line, it might be unusual, but if you feel you can do it, then you get after it, and you do it with a vengeance. And take it seriously and give it your dedication, work hard. And he said a very wise thing. I can hear him saying it now, once again he had a smile in his voice. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. I thought I liked that.
Yeah.
So Eric Seal was a great mentor. Who else was there Who else? There were lots of people that you worked with along the way. I remember Tom Bright at Radio Wave. He was a comedian and actor who'd worked with Russ Abbott and many people. Wonderfully funny, witty man with a great sense of show business and gag writing and coming up with funny lines and things like that. It was great working with him for a little while at Radio Wave in Blackpool. He was a great mentor. TV producer called Richard Hearsey, who I worked with on some of the early TV shows that I did, Alter Ego, where I would interview certain characters as if I was them.
Yeah. So I'm talking to Tom Baker as Tom Baker. You can imagine how bizarre that goes.
Oh, the astronomer Patrick Moore. That was Patrick Moore. And of course, Patrick being very, very eccentric, well, he would really rise to this. Yes. Yes, indeed. Oh, dear.
Yeah, Richard Hearsey. A great mentor has been Bill Dare, the creator and producer of Dead Ringers, who has a very laconic and laid-back approach to comedy, mixed in with an absolute laser precision of the mechanics of what makes a sketch work. He's able to lacerate a sketch if need be, cutting the various bits out, and also with the whole run of a program, with the light and shade of a radio episode. He's so precisely aware of how to do that, but he does it in the most laid-back, laconic fashion, which gives an ease to it and a naturalness to it. So Bill Dare has always been a great mentor, I think.
You've had an amazing career from the outside looking in. It's been hit after hit TV shows, lots of unusual opportunities along the way. In terms of the life skills you need to bring to that profession to make it work, what are the secret ingredients?
I think patience, quiet determination, being good to work with. I think not having an ego.
Don't be an asshole.
Yes, exactly. Egos and arrogance are so tedious.
And you must witness that.
Oh dear, you do. You do. It's such a tedious, it's just a sort of an insecurity. People trying to shore up.
Must be sad when you witness that and you see it tripping people over.
Yeah, but it's up to them.
Yeah.
If they feel that is the way that you show strength and you appear confident and so on. If it's with noise and bluster, I don't know. Usually there's not much substance behind that. It's not necessary. I always prefer the quiet people who just have a calm eye on the ball.
Yeah.
There's
a few specific things I wanted to talk to you about, out of interest as much as anything. Ricky Gervais. I watched the little interview you did with him. It was amazing. And actually one of the pioneers in the podcast world.
Yeah.
With the skits he was doing. What was his name?
Carl Pilkington.
Yeah, Carl Pilkington.
Yes.
Yeah, what's the point?
Yes.
They were genius. I remember we had a gig in Killarney with Bing Crosby's grandson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Phil Crosby Jr. So Phil Crosby Jr., his friend Beal, myself and Dee, after this gig in Killarney, we had to take a very late drive to Dublin because he was. We had him on the TV first thing the following morning. We were promoting Christmas in Killarney.
Yeah.
The B-side of White Christmas, believe it or not, is a song called Christmas in Killarney by Bing Crosby. So that was a little gimmick we had to promote our lovely event. All the way up in the car, we had the CDs at the time of the Ricky Gervais podcast.
Yeah.
And our two American boys who had never heard of Ricky Gervais were breaking their backsides laughing from the minute we left Killarney to when we rolled into Dublin. I heard the howls of laughter by Ricky and yourself on that show. Is he a nice character?
He is. I admire Ricky Gervais enormously. He's got a beautiful instinct for comedy and a brilliant instinct for truth. And I think he's not afraid to tackle any subject. And the more difficult, the more insightful he seems to become. The more wisdom he brings to it. And I think he's extraordinary. I really do. I love the fact that he will bring a sense of insight and wisdom to the most difficult of subjects. And I think it takes a real skill to do that. You've got to have a real kind of instinct to do that. And I think he's absolutely marvellous. His sense of reinvention as well. After The Office, which was the most beautifully...
It was genius.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got the sense of the rapport he has with Stephen Merchant in inventing that. And then extras after that. Perfect contrast.
Yeah, which was genius again. What an
Utterly.
amazing show. What an
Yeah.
amazing show. And I love the afterlife.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure if that reflected a period in his life or things that were going on. But yeah, anyone who has old parents, I think, can relate to that immediately.
Yes,
You know, the sensitivity of it.
Yeah. And I think he's able to challenge absurdity. I think he's able to challenge people being offended, but in a performative way,
Yeah.
which people do for attention on social media these days. He can just undercut it with an observation, a word, a description. He just sets it right. And I think it's important we have that kind of voice and instinct around.
And theatre. I know you've done theatre as well.
Yeah.
So you became an actor.
Yes, I suppose that's the next sort of turn. I love playing characters, not just in a quick comedy sketch, but over a full narrative, over a full story.
And was that a huge leap for you, or was it just a natural progression?
Yes, I think a little bit of an evolution.
Yeah.
Using a different part of your brain, rather than aiming for the punchline of a sketch.
Did you need that? Did you need that change for yourself?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
You've got to think, right, okay. You know, I mean, I'll always do a bit of sketch comedy. I'd love doing sketch comedy. But play characters over a longer scene, over the full narrative, where you're aiming to hit nuggets of truth and a feeling, rather than exaggeration or a punchline.
Yeah. And is that a challenge, trying to get others to see you in a different light? Because, you know, you've worked very hard. People know the John Culshaw, the guy who cracks jokes and does all these funny voices and impersonations. Now you want them to see you in a different light. Was that difficult?
Yes, you've just got to set about doing it.
Yeah.
And create the perception that that's what people will see.
Yeah.
And I've done it a few times up to now. I've played, for the World Service, I played David Bowie in a radio drama called The Final Take, directed by Dirk Maggs and written by David Morley. That was a privilege to do, and fascinating just studying David Bowie for the sense of playing him over a half-hour drama, just getting the sense of ideas and how that all works together.
That was one of the things that I wanted to ask you about. Because that was about his last album,
Yes, it was.
which was
Yes, Black Star.
a deep, deep album at this particular point in time in his life when he knew he was dying.
Yes.
It's some album. To do that and pull that off in a convincing way, that's more than impersonating his voice.
It was such an interesting... David Morley, who wrote it, a great, great David Bowie fan. And the way that he wrote that with the sense of David Bowie making the Black Star album. And yes, he knew how serious his illness was. But with David Bowie's great affinity with emotion and meaning, he would want to explore where this would lead musically, so as not to waste those feelings, to have them for the sense of expression of it, and to see where that would go to, and where he could take the audience with him.
Was that a part you chased? Was that something that someone asked you to do, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I was asked by David Morley, who wrote it. Says, "Can you do David Bowie?" I said, "Oh yeah, that'd be all right." And I was thinking of, exaggerated versions that are done in this sort of way in phone calls and whatnot. I says, "Yeah, that's fine. I could do a Bowie." "Oh, great. We need to do it. We want to do this drama for the World Service, The Final Take in the studio. Could you do it this Wednesday?" "Hang on, this is just 3 days away." "No, I couldn't do it on Wednesday."
Yeah.
For this kind of piece, I need to really, really absorb all of this. I need to listen endlessly, just watch endless interviews, just really digest it, immerse, so you're there to the point where you just can't forget it. This has to take you over completely. This is not just a quick exaggeration in a sketch. The first thing you do is start looking for YouTube clips, interviews, anything like that. And the first one I happened to put on was David Bowie, sitting back, and he was saying, very serendipitous that this should be the first interview that I come across, because I was really quite spooked by the sense of the challenge of doing this, knowing how loyal and dedicated David Bowie's fans are, and a very intelligent group of people. Get this wrong, and not good, disrespectful, not good. And the first interview clip, and I remember it so vividly, And David Bowie said, the other thing I would say is, if you feel comfortable in the area you're working in, you're probably not working in the right area. Always go a little bit out of your depth, go a little bit out of your comfort zone. And the moment you feel your feet aren't quite touching the bottom of the water, then you're just about in the right place to do something exciting. And I thought, oh, that's exactly how I feel now.
Yeah.
Of all the serendipity, of all the luck for this to be the first clip, you do feel scared, but use it. Let that fuel you, not distract you.
So 3 days preparation ended up being how much preparation?
3 weeks.
Yeah.
3 weeks, and there was a wonderful interview called Verbatim, which had been on the on BBC Sounds, and I listened to that over and over and over. It was a wonderful reference point because I just had David Bowie being very conversational, talking about these days, in the 60s and working with Tony Visconti, and there he was, just this kind of energy. You could feel the ideas flowing at work and that kind of thing. And you just got such a sense of how all this flow of ideas turned into the greatest music that's ever been made. So that was a great reference. And very often I'd listen to it, sometimes quite subconsciously. It's good to put these things on as you're drifting off to sleep. Then it goes into your subconscious mind as well as your very deliberate mind.
In a way, your buddy's suggestion about you being able to turn this around in 3 days, does that capture how people would view your craft? He's just great at picking up voices, he can just turn them around like that. And that's not true. You obviously have to study and prepare and research.
Yeah.
It's not something you can just turn around as a trick.
No, that's right. You do need to let it really absorb.
Yeah.
And maybe some characters, perhaps I could have done that with if there'd been characters I'd been taking off for years.
Yeah.
But with Bowie, I'd done David Bowie in sketches or phone calls where it's very exaggerated. For this, where it's not about what you see and hear, it's really about what you feel and capturing all the things that make people adore him. You've got to tap into all of that. That's where you need a different look into it altogether.
On the subject of adoring someone, how about Partygate?
Oh, wow. Well, that was a different angle altogether. Yeah, the director, Joseph Bullman, was asked by Channel 4 to take all of the information about Partygate in the Sue Gray report and do a docudrama about it, just to give a sense of what all the Partygate allegations and the Sue Gray report, what did that look like in reality at the time the pandemic was going on? What did that actually look like? And how far removed was that from the guidelines that everyone had been given? And I was asked to play Boris Johnson in that in such a way that it would be stitched together with real news reports. So I was sort of filmed at oblique angles or from the back in a sort of a reportage, very grabbed, that kind of way. And so that gave a sense of how Boris Johnson always used, he's doing it now, plugging his book. It shows how he always used distraction, bluster, clowning, to anything but to deal with the point in hand, anything to deal with the matter in hand. There's, talk about something comical, something, oh yes, I make buses out of matchsticks. So the attention is on that, anything but the issue. Knock about bluster and knock about this, that and the other as an excuse to not deal with the issue at hand. That was shown very starkly how he would do that within Downing Street, not just in an interview with Laura Kuenssberg or whoever he was talking to, Nick Ferrari, but just how he got through his day-to-day. The knockabout bluster was in that as well.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I remember watching it at the time.
Yes,
not knowing who you were or anything, just wow, what a huge show on the telly. Did that take a long time, that project?
Yes, I think it was probably about 2 or 3 weeks of filming. I think Joseph Bullman spent, longer writing it and had very little time to edit it, in the edit afterwards. There was so much that we did, finding the choices to put together to make a coherent and balanced docudrama. That must have been a challenge. I do admire, producers and directors whose minds can tackle all of that. And to keep it feeling real and with a sense of what the atmosphere would have been like. Much of it was improvised. The scene we were dealing with, the Sue Gray report would have said, this was said, that was said, this point was made, the other point. And we keep all that in our head and then just kind of, improvise it, say those things. Of course, course, we cannot lock down again. If we let them all be. Sacrifices will be. We had to sort of improvise that, but sticking very close to the point. There were people looking at the report and saying, "Oh, yeah, just phrase it this way." Right, okay. And so it was partially improvised, just to give it that feeling of immediacy.
Did you enjoy that?
Yes, it was a very interesting challenge.
Yeah.
And it did feel real. It didn't feel stilted in any way or just saying the lines. It was hitting the markers of the point to be made and what had taken place within each scene, but it felt spontaneous, conversational, real, naturalistic. Yes, it felt like that. And when it was broadcast about a year ago, we're in October 24 now, it was about a year ago that it was broadcast, and there was a heck of a reaction that came with it, a very angry reaction, because it had been made so visible, which I think was important that it was. It was a Sue Gray report of many thousands of detailed words. The general public are never really going to see that, but the general public will see it if it's in a drama that's relatable, and it just brings it all to life,
Yeah, and you never know, John. They might try to do the same with our good buddy who was in here earlier.
Well, my goodness. Yes, I mean, this is just another quantum burst that a mindset like that occupies.
Yeah. Tell me about tectonic plates and your West Cork journey.
Oh, wow. Well, I do love this part of the world. I do absolutely adore this part of the world. It brings such a sense of peace, natural beauty, generosity, dark astronomical sky. Be very good for the Orionids meteor shower soon. I first visited here. I went to visit some friends back in 1999, and I just drove here, and I loved the journey from Cork Airport down to Crookhaven. And the further you go, the more rustic and the more beautiful the journey becomes, really. You get closer to the sea and to the landscape. When you get deep into that wild Atlantic way, very special lands, these. And I just remember sitting in my friend's house. How old was I? 31 at the time. Just turned 31 back in 1999, and just looking over the water and just feeling, wow, what on earth has happened? It was a very visceral reaction. And I visited this area at least every year or 18 months ever since. And I remember becoming very etched to this place since that time.
So what role do you see it playing in your life now?
I think bringing a sense of peacefulness, bringing a sense of, things can be very, very quiet for life lived to be full. It doesn't always need to be rabble-rousing and rock and roll. You can just pull back your curtains and see the sun coming up over the water. That'll do it. Or, just time with very genuine friends. You've got to hit those nuggets of truth. You can go to London and do the rock and roll and the comedy and the telly and the script and all that palaver. That has its place, but you have to contrast that with the truth of life.
You can dip in and dip out.
Yeah, things have to be real. You've got to have lots and lots of real. And I do love the saying that, in life, as you look back, you see that the little things were the big things.
Have you figured out what happiness is?
Yes, I think so. I think it's, the little things are the big things. And it's the art of contentment and being grateful for what you have and seeing a sense of fascination and challenge for things that you don't have but you might quite like to, and the challenge in maybe fashioning a situation where it will evolve that way, be that career-wise or anything like that.
And if you had succeeded in that audition for that football team and you were a star striker and the ball hits the back of the net, that sense of elation. So at this point in time, that sense of elation and where it comes from. So what does winning look like for you now? Where do those moments come from?
Winning. I love, it might be doing some sort of professional project where you look back on it afterwards and you think that really clicked together very nicely, and it's worth something and it means something. And there was a great feeling in the making of it. So it could be something like that, or, do you know what, I think the greatest elation that I love to chase solar eclipses, total solar eclipses. And up to now I've been very lucky to see 4 total eclipses and 1 annular, 1 ring of fire eclipse. And seeing those the vision of nature at its most spectacular. And if you see a total solar eclipse, you really feel that you've witnessed something absolutely incredible. I find those elating, partially because the stress beforehand, you can't control the weather. You might
so
miss
you know
it.
what's happening, but you can't see it.
I saw one north of the Faroe Islands in 2015, and the days leading up to it had been pristine blue skies. Pristine blue skies. The morning of the total eclipse, I opened the curtains of the ship. I was very nervous looking at the weather. Is it going to cooperate with you or not? Absolutely leaden grey skies. Rain, sleet. Ugh. Well, it's a write-off then. It's a write-off. We look forward to Idaho in 2017. Fair enough. I remember Pete Lawrence, the great astronomer, had seen the weather forecast for this day, and he'd spoken to Captain Lars, the commander of the ship, and had convinced him to change course the moment we saw the weather was terrible. And we felt the ship doing a handbrake turn and sailing at great speed to where the weather was going to be better. This was quite early in the day, and it was quite choppy, very, very choppy. One of the other astronomers was in a cabin, and there was a couple in there that the wall was thin, you could hear them nattering. One particular choppy wave, they heard the sliding of glass like this, and a smash, and somebody calling out, "Oh Christ, me teeth!" But anyway, the ship was going in the right direction. And sure enough, we started to see the clouds, first with cracks in them, and then the sun came up. That burned off a bit more of the clouds and the cracks got wider. And we started to see the partial phases, that little bite taken out of the sun, and that getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, when that happens, when the moon starts to block out the sun, that has an effect on the clouds and dissipates them even more. So these weather conditions are going from absolute leaden, useless, it's a write-off, to this is sort of starting to cook. We've got a chance here. And then a wonderful fellow, God rest him, called Frank, aged 95 at the time, and he was the dad of Peter, who was one of the tour organisers. He came out when it was maybe not seeming to be a write-off weather-wise. And Frank, this was the first time that he granted himself the chance to actually go out anywhere since he lost his wife. He'd really been a little bit reclusive up to then, but this was the first time when he gave himself a chance. And Frank came out, wonderful fellow, 95. And I'm sure that he brought us luck, because as soon as he was out there in the mix, the clouds started to part even more. And when there was a tiny crescent of the sun left, the clouds were surrounding it, and they parted almost like the waters of the Red Sea, and they framed a perfectly, beautifully unencumbered total solar eclipse. And seeing Frank's elation, we all had that sense of elation. So I think maybe that's where it comes in. When you're beneath nature's greatest sight, in the shadow of the moon cast upon the earth, I think that's what does it for me.
I was going to ask you a question that I ask a lot of my guests, and it's the very last question. And what was your best day ever? Have you just described it to me?
My best day ever. It might have been that. Might have been doing the Royal Variety Show for the first time. I always did love going on the Parkinson chat show.
Why?
I think the sense of why is a chancer from Ormskirk on a show like this, where Muhammad Ali and Jimmy Cagney and Lauren Bacall have been on. Why am I here?
Have you figured it out?
Well, I think it was just a bit of luck. I was, Dead Ringers had just started at the time, and sometimes the likes of us would be on there, and I remember being so nervous, so nervous for all of those reasons. Michael Parkinson shows why he was the greatest chat show host of them all. The moment he started just sort of talking in that sort of way, and straight away he would put you at your ease, and that kind of that sort of.
In the same way, Terry Wogan would do the same thing. That wonderful warmth, that conversational way of Sir Terry Wogan. That great sort of way of speaking to just one person.
Those were the great hosts. It's been like this speaking with you, Craig.
On the subject of Terry Wogan and West Cork, there's a whole bunch of other accents you're going to have to wrap your arms around.
Yes.
Is that Irish,
Yes.
deep West Cork.
I love the way around here, you know, there's a certain tune, you know, there's a certain musicality, and people, you know, it was quite a rainy day, like.
The word "like" comes at the end.
Of course.
It was a very rainy day, like. But, you know, that kind of thing, you know, when folks do say like, you know, it's,
There's a lovely musicality.
you know, different to Dublin, you know, which has that kind of thing. And, you know, when you think of everybody who travelled from Dublin over to Liverpool, you know, those accents are very similar, you know. There's a similar rhythm. You know, if you have if you have the Dublin accent and you add sort of a Lancashire influence and the Industrial Revolution, which tightens up the lungs like that, you can maybe see where the influence of the Liverpool accent come from. You know, I think the Welsh accent sort of got a different kind of Scouse as well, you know. You get that sort of influence there with it too, you know.
So how they form is just intriguing.
Will we have a pint?
I think we've earned it, don't you? Thank you.
John, thank
What
you
a
so
joy.
much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank
Good man
you.
yourself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.